Hi, everyone. How's the mic doing? Good? Okay, great. So I'm going to speak fairly briefly because I know we are going to have questions at the end after all the speakers, is my understanding. So I'm just going to talk about the current state of the law, both on the state and federal level primarily, because obviously there's differences. And I'll give sort of the official legal. I might give a little bit of opinion too, but I'll be clear when it's opinion versus just straight legal reality at the moment. So first of all, cannabis was previously legal only in California, only for medical, as in you had to have a rec card, which I believe some of the people in this room who use cannabis for medical benefits had. So prior to January 1st, cannabis was only legal for people who had rec cards going through collectives that were set up to allow medical patients to use cannabis and grow cannabis, manufacture cannabis for the benefits of other medical cannabis patients. On January 1st, that changed in California. Now, if you're licensed, if a business is licensed, they can sell cannabis, what is officially termed as adult use, used sort of in popular culture, recreational, which means you don't need a rec card. Anyone who's 21 and over has a valid ID that shows they're an adult 21 over can go to a licensed cannabis business, like say if it's a dispensary to purchase cannabis products. That could be, again, the other speakers will speak more about different types of products that are available, but add things you may be familiar with or not, including what we call the flower, which is basically like anything that you would smoke, like traditionally, all the way to like edibles, oils, and other products that are derived from cannabis. So that is now legal if you have a license from the state of California, and the state's issuing licenses for growers, manufacturers, which is anyone who's processing cannabis, testing labs, all the cannabis now, which I'm sure the other speakers will talk about too. All the cannabis that's legal in the state of California is going to be tested to make sure that the dosing is right, as well as to avoid like impurities like pesticides, pathogens, chemicals, etc., that the products are free of that and are safe. As well as retailers such as dispensaries and delivery services, of which I believe there's one that operates legally within this community. So there's going to be licenses available for all of that. So the state issues those licenses, but in California, it's a dual licensing scheme, which means in order for a cannabis business to be licensed, the municipality, as in the city, if it's a city, or if it's an unincorporated area, the county, has to be okay with that business doing what they're doing. So, for example, in Orange County, if you're in Santa Ana, if you get allows dispensaries. Where I live, Costa Mesa allows manufacturers and testing labs and distributors, which are basically business-to-business entities that distribute between different license holders, but does not allow a dispensary. So you wouldn't be able to get a license currently for a dispensary in Costa Mesa because the city doesn't allow it. That may change at some point, but that's the current state of affairs in California, is that dual licensing scheme. So that's California. So there's a number of states where this is where it gets tricky and confusing, and there's a lot of misinformation. So I believe 8 states currently where cannabis is legal for adult use, and about 20 something more where it's legal at least to some degree or another for medical. However, it's still, as many people in this room may be aware, it's still federally illegal. It's been federally illegal since the 1930s. It's classified as a Schedule I drug, which means the federal government currently considers cannabis to be on the same level as things like heroin. Now, whether you consider that to be logical or not, I mean, I have my own personal opinion, which, as you might not be surprised to find out, given that I represent clients in this industry, that I do not agree with that, but that's my own personal opinion. It might be an opinion shared by most of the people in this room, but that's the reality. However, despite that, and this is where I'm going to veer into opinion a little bit, although I think it's well-founded opinion, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I would not practice law or feel comfortable advising clients to do businesses in this area if I had like serious concerns about the federal government interfering in states where cannabis is legal on the state level. Now, there are some caveats to that I'm going to talk about, but if the federal government currently does not have, despite attorney, I'm not going to weigh in on politics or the president because it's not the forum for that, but despite what Attorney General Sessions stated on January 4th of this year, and they revoked something known as the Cole Memo, which was a non-binding advisory memo issued during the Obama administration, which basically said the federal government would not go after state-compliant medical cannabis businesses if they did not trigger like a number of enforcement priorities. And those enforcement priorities are primarily the caveats I'm going to mention in a second. But despite that, the federal government does not have the budgeting authority from Congress. The budget that's currently, I believe, is passing through Congress right now renews the amendment that does not give Congress the budget to go after state cannabis businesses. So they don't have the money. They don't have the political will. Medical cannabis especially is well supported in states, not just in like, again, not to get too political, but it's just realities of what politicians care about, not just in like quote unquote blue states like California, but in quote unquote purple states like Florida and Ohio. Florida, in the same election where they voted for President Trump, also voted for medical cannabis by about a 70-30 margin. So there's just not the political will or the budget for the federal government to do anything about state compliant cannabis. Now, there are some exceptions. You do things such as transport across state lines. That does not matter whether it's legal in both states, but that's federal jurisdiction. You do that, that's going to be a different issue than what you're doing within the state. Anything involving minors, anything involving trafficking in drugs that are not cannabis, those are all going to be different enforcement priorities that are going to not have the same. But in terms of like, is the federal government going to have the money or will or just reality of doing it, of what it would entail to do it, to like raid cannabis businesses or go after individual users or patients in California who are following state law? That's just not, I mean, there's no way to speak in political absolutes. I think we've all learned that in the last couple of years, if nothing else. But my own personal opinion, which I think is pretty well supported, is it's extremely unlikely. So in terms of, should you feel safe legally to use cannabis, whether as a medical patient or as an adult consumer, given that it's now legal in under state law in California, I think it's very, again, without being able to speak in absolute, I think it's very reasonable to say that there's just no reason to think that as long as you're following state law that you're going to have any problems legally, despite the federal prohibition. Again, I've just personal anecdote. I had a mother who I believe was a mother of a friend who I believe was a senior who put cannabis in the mail. Don't do that. Don't travel with it. Don't fly with it. But within the state of California, I mean, speaking of driving, it's going to be just like alcohol. There's currently no test for it that's effective for cannabis. I mean, the police are working on, but currently there's no effective test equivalent to a breathalyzer. But nonetheless, as I think most people in this room would agree, it should be driving while intoxicated, whether alcohol, cannabis, or anything else is still legal. So don't drive intoxicated. Keep it in the trunk, just like it's an open container law, just like alcohol. Just like if you have an open bottle of beer, keep it in the trunk. If you have open cannabis products, or probably just, I don't know, I always recommend on the safer side, just keep it all in the trunk. Just like same as alcohol. That's my advice on that if you are traveling by vehicle with it. Now I want to talk very briefly before I pass on to the next speaker about one type of products that's treated differently than cannabis according to state and federal law, which is industrial hemp-derived CBD products. I'm not sure, but I believe the other speakers may talk about some of the medical benefits of CBD as well as cannabis. CBD currently, which is a cannabis-derived product, but is not intoxicating, but does have some of the medical benefits. If it's derived and processed a certain way where the state and federal governments classify it as what's called industrial hemp. Now, my understanding, the doctor and other speakers could speak to this better than I can, is in terms of its effects, there's no meaningful difference between industrial hemp CBD and cannabis-derived CBD if the THC levels are below a certain threshold, but they're treated different legally. But if it is an industrial hemp CBD product, there's at least some support for it being treated differently by the federal government. Like, for example, Walmart sells industrial hemp-derived CBD products online. So interpret that as you will, but Walmart's doing it, so, you know, they have expensive lawyers. They probably know what they're doing. So with industrial hemp CBD products, some of these rules might be different, and there's also currently not a state licensing scheme for industrial hemp CBD. I believe that will change, but currently you don't need a license to grow, sell, manufacture industrial hemp-derived CBD products the way you do for cannabis, which brings up another aside. All these rules about licensing, or the collectives previous to this applies to commercial cannabis. Like, if you want, you know, insofar as you don't run into issues with your neighbors or your community, any citizen in California can grow 6 mature plants or 12 immature plants and have like a small amount of, you know, processed cannabis for their own previously for their own medical use, now just for their own medical or adult use, assuming they're over 21. That's non-commercial. That means you're not selling it, you're not growing it for other people. Or if you are growing it with other people, it's through like a collective. That's still going to be allowed for a period of time. The collectives are currently I believe this is something that's still in flux. As of now, the collectives are set to expire the beginning of next year. So that means for commercial cannabis, again, not for personal use, you will need a license the beginning of next year in order to, if you're going to be growing, manufacturing, distributing, delivering, or selling commercially. So that's something to keep in mind. But in terms of your own personal use, that is not something that you need a license for. That's something you're entitled to do as a citizen here. So I think that covers all the basic points that I want to talk about. I believe after the other speakers, there'll be questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions after the other speakers. Thank you so much.
We're going to have Dr. Kent Crowley join us now. He is a board certified through the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He received his Doctor of Pharmacology from the University of California, San Francisco, where they know a little bit about. I lived up there in the 70s and the late 60s. So he's going to talk about what is cannabis, and then we'll talk about whatever comes up later.
Thank you. Well, how many people in the audience are utilize cannabis in a medical?
I don't think we want to.
Oh, we don't want to do that. We're on television. Sorry about that. Strike that question. Cannabis, as far as my practice goes, in incorporating it into functional medicine, has been a tremendous tool to help people deal with symptoms, improve their quality of life, treat diseases, get many patients off of pharmaceuticals, blood pressure, for instance, lowering opiate use. Cannabis is a powerful adaptogenic herb. Adaptogens are plant-based phytochemicals that our body can recognize and utilize in varying degrees over a given period of time. And what cannabis ultimately does with our physiology is it helps us to maintain or reach homeostasis, that balance that we look for our physiology to be operating optimally. Our endocannabinoid system is a powerful system that kind of sits on top of every physiologic process in our body, and we make endocannabinoids, that's why we call them endo, within. Anandamide and 2-AG are two of the endocannabinoids that we know most about. Before 11 years ago, we really didn't fully understand what the endocannabinoid system could do and how powerful it is. When I used to do my 10Ks and sprint triathlons when I was much younger, I used to love that runner's high, and I always thought that it was, mu receptors and endorphins. Well, we now know that it's also endocannabinoids. So this unique system that that we have, that we're learning much more about, is still recognized by the government as a Schedule I drug, as John mentioned, which means that in the eyes of the FDA, there is no medical indication, no medical use that would justify de-scheduling that from a Schedule I to something, 2 through 5, or not scheduling it at all. So how do we deal with this, this federal issue, recognizing that people have tremendous results if they incorporate cannabis appropriately? It's really important that you incorporate it safely. Select the right mixture. We typically talk about THC and CBD as two of the main cannabinoids that we find products dosed around. THC is, in the neutral form, the cannabinoid that gets you high, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. CBD, on the other hand, is cannabidiol, and that doesn't have any psychoactive component. And in fact, it helps to lower the psychoactivity if it's taken in combination or taken, say, an hour before you get exposed to THC, again in the neutral form, not the acidic form. The acidic form of THC is found in the plant mainly. So when it gets heated or decarboxylated, then that THCAA turns into THC, and that's where everyone gets high. In 2017, there was several things that were very significant in an effort to identify, does cannabis have medical indications? Now we know that there's a drug company out there called GW Pharma. They have two products that are in over 24 countries being used as a pharmaceutical. One is Sativex and one is Epidiolex. One is a mixture, roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, of a whole plant extract of THC and CBD, and the other one is a CBD-only product. So this has found its way through drug studies and the equivalent of the FDA in the US to be able to be prescribed by different countries for patients that, find it helpful. And there's a myriad of indications that cannabis can be used for. Probably the top one here, actually, throughout the US, it's mainly pain. So the National Academy of Sciences, the the first part of 17, went back and reviewed all of the data that was out on cannabis. Looked at every study that was out there. The previous review that they did was in 1999. And what they found was there was unequivocal evidence. That means positive, supportive evidence that cannabis had 3 indications that it could be used for. 1, in chronic pain in adults. 2, in the symptoms associated with chemotherapy. And 3, in the spasticity associated with MS. This is a non-political agency, and it was made up with Dr. Abrams up at UCSF and several other professors, department chairs around the country, Yale, Harvard, everywhere. No one talks about that. The news media didn't bring it up at all, and I just find it atrocious. The CDC, in looking at does THC in a drug test warrant a pain doctor to fire their patient? Well, they said, no, stop looking for THC doctors because it's probably helping the situation. It's not what we think it used to be. There is probably some support, helpful outcomes that can come by using cannabis and any type of pain condition or pain treatment regimen. What I have found in our clinic, seeing several thousand patients, and I did actually a study on an observational longitudinal study on 49 patients that came into our clinic, and we just took a look at who has chronic non-cancer pain as one of their indications. Okay, we got 81, and then whittling them down by exclusion. Do we have all the data points we need? Can we contact them? Did we get pre and post numeric analog scores, something that any pain patient has probably heard a doctor ask? Tell me, how much pain do you have on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 is no pain, and 10 is unbearable pass-out pain. And this subjective scale is actually very, very helpful because it's been validated in so many studies. So we did this longitudinal observational study of our patients. We ended up with 49, and 27 of them were on opiates. And so when we talked to them, we started everyone on CBD. And it happened to be a dosage form called a troche. So we had them take a quarter of a troche 3 times a day and not change their medication, whatever it was. The only advice that we gave them is if you don't feel like reaching for the Norco or the Vicodin or the oxycodone, don't take it. Wait until you feel like you need to take it. And what we observed in 3 different groups, 30 days, 60 days, and greater than 90 days or greater, is that we saw an 85.2% reduction in opiate use, all on their own. No withdrawal, no adverse effects, and more importantly, better pain control and a better quality of life. That's profound. And we see it regularly if we're selecting the right medication. Now, many people need THC to help with pain or to help with forgetting about pain. There's a lot of people that live with pain, and it's never going to go below a 5 out of 10. That's the best we can get. So how can we improve their quality of life? Well, there's ways to do it. You know, as a functional medicine expert, I use diet, lifestyle, all kinds of modalities. But to be able to use an adaptogenic herb that is disease state modifying, isn't toxic, has a huge therapeutic index. That's, you know, if you have a big one, then it's unlikely to cause toxicity. And if it's a very narrow one like digoxin, a lot of people have, you know, had something like that. It's a very narrow therapeutic index, so you can't go very, you know, off the dose, you know, too high, or you'll become toxic very quickly. So in this effort here, sharing this information, I want to make sure that we make available to you the ability to ask questions. You know, there's so many things that I could talk about cannabis and what I've seen it do for patients. Everything from inflammatory bowel disease to, you know, pain is just a tremendous easy thing to do. I want to make also you guys aware of that there is a lot of misinformation on the internet. I just decided to take a look today do a morphine, cannabis, drug interaction, and just look and see what's out there. Well, it listed 602 drug interactions on drugs.com, and it listed morphine as a severe interaction. The unique thing about cannabis is it doesn't go to the respiratory depressant sites of the brain. So there is no respiratory depression. There is no additive effect. If you're taking an opiate, that can affect respiration. If you add alcohol, it can affect respiration. If you add a benzodiazepine like Valium or Xanax or Ativan, anything like that, it can, you know, be additive, and that's why we're having so many people die. And it's not, you know, it's an overdose of combos, as well as these, you know, designer fentanyl drugs that are out there. So have I run long enough?
We'll get back to you.
Okay, so I just want to make the point very clear that cannabis is a very viable adaptogenic herb. It has a very safe index. It can make people, if they get too much, the wrong route of administration, the wrong dose, the wrong ratio, very high and think that they're going to die, but they're not. It just goes away. So with that, I'll pass it on to Sherry.
Thank you so much. We're going to have our next two speakers talk to you a little bit about, well, first of all, you know Sherry is in the village, is a villager, and is an advocate for marijuana use, correct use of marijuana, maybe we should keep saying. And, gosh, I keep wanting to call you Kristen, and it's not. Candace. There we go. And Candace. And I've asked both of them to talk about their own experience in advocacy and what they're seeing, what's happening with seniors, how seniors can get access to it, getting rid of some of the bad feelings about the use of marijuana for medical or recreational, I don't care what it is saying to you that it's all right to do this, it's all right to question your doctor, it's all right to ask questions of your physician to find out if this might be helpful to you. And because they are both advocates and well aware of what's going on, if you get a no from your doctor, you may want to go and get another opinion to see. And I'm sure that Kent would agree that you can ask these questions and you need to ask them of more than one person. So Sherry had a couple of her guests that came this evening to visit with us. So you guys have a mic down there, and I'll let you go to it. You can either stand or sit, whatever makes you happy. But Candace, fill the audience in on who you represent.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Candace Hawes. I'm the founder and director of Orange County NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. We've been in existence for 15 years now. Thank you. We actually gathered 13,000 signatures, raised over $250,000 to get the medical marijuana ballot on the books in Santa Ana. So without people advocating, you don't see change. So it's great that we have one city here in Orange County, Santa Ana, that is licensing medical marijuana dispensaries. I just wanted to point out one person though, Anna Boyce, sitting here in the second row. If it wasn't for Anna Boyce, we wouldn't be talking about medical marijuana here or in any other state. You guys probably know that California was the first state to pass medical marijuana laws back in 1996, and she was one of the authors and proponents of that bill. So she's a very important person, so we're lucky to have her with us here today. I also work now in the city of Santa Ana at Bud and Bloom, which is one of the licensed dispensaries. We actually run a shuttle to and from the city once a month. We had one today. So if you're ever just curious about seeing what a dispensary is, looking at the products, that's an opportunity just to learn and to be exposed. You can definitely find information about that at the front table or by contacting me. But I wanted to kind of point out and let you guys know that there's different ways of using cannabis than just combustion smoking, which is what many people have been exposed to throughout their life, is people, smoking joints or bongs. That's kind of the old way of using cannabis. People still do prefer the flower form, but nowadays a healthier way of using flower cannabis is to vaporize. With a vaporizer, you're using a contraption, either a pen or a vaporizer device that would sit on your table. And what it does is it heats up the cannabis, CBD, terpenes to a level where they can be released, but you're not actually combusting anything, so you're not getting, burnt material in your lungs. So that's a healthier way of using cannabis. There's also edible forms. Cannabis put into everything from drinks to candy bars to gummies. Every time I go in the dispensary, there's something new, and it just blows my mind. The state now is regulating medical marijuana, or dispensaries, medical and adult, and also products. So we used to see products back in the old days with like 1,000 milligrams in them. That's a really high dose, and that's how people would get themselves into trouble. The new guidelines are going to have limits. So from this point on in the future, you're going to see that edibles are going to be either limited to 100 milligrams in one package for adult use, or else if you're a medical marijuana patient, you can buy products that have up to 200 milligrams in the package. And under the new state guidelines, each of those medical marijuana or those edible products has to be delineated in a 10 milligram dosage. So if you buy gummies, they're going to be 10 milligrams each or less. If you're going to buy a candy bar, it's going to be perforated, so you can break off and easily distinguish what 10 milligrams is. There's even like snack mixes and potato chips, and you'll find in the future now they're going to be in little 10 milligram bags. So it makes it really easy for you guys to know how much you're taking and to make sure that you're taking the proper amount. For people that are completely naive to cannabis, a good starting dose is 2.5 milligrams, possibly 5 milligrams if maybe you're wanting to start at nighttime and you're not worried about being a little drowsy. And it moves up from there. People with a higher tolerance sometimes will need 30 milligrams or even more if they're using it for a pain condition. There's also capsules, so cannabis put into pills, easier for people to take. Another product that's gaining in popularity is sublinguals, also tinctures and buccal absorption methods. So what that is drops in their mouth. So you've probably seen some friends before that have a liquid form of cannabis and they have a dropper, and you would put a couple drops into your mouth. If you just drop it underneath your tongue, then that's a sublingual. If you place it between your lip and your gum up here, that would be a buccal absorption. That was the method that Dr. Kent talked about, a troche. So those are rising in popularity because they're very discreet. It's a good way to get your base cannabis into your system, and a lot of people are moving that way. Another way that people are using it nowadays for pain conditions is transdermal patches. When you use a transdermal patch, though, it can cross the blood barrier, right? So you may feel psychoactive effects from a transdermal patch, but they're very effective. On the other hand, there's also a growing line of topicals. So that would be like creams, lotions, oils that you can put on the outside of your skin. Those don't enter the bloodstream, so you can use those and you won't feel any psychoactive effects, which is, psychoactive kind of sounds like it's a scary word, but what I should say is like a slight head change where you can kind of feel the difference in perception, usually a positive experience, but the word is kind of scary. But anyways, with topicals, you don't have to worry about that kind of effect. The same thing if you're using a product that's all CBD, same thing, you're not going to have any change, you're not going to feel any difference. Although there are things happening within the body, CBD and topicals are good at reducing inflammation, and inflammation is what causes pain. So if you can reduce that inflammation, you can help bring down your pain levels. And then another way that people can use cannabis is with suppositories. Not a very popular method right now, but it's probably, I've heard from scientists, the actual cleanest and one of the best effective ways to use cannabis. But again, not a lot of that out there. So just kind of wanted to give you guys that information about different ways that you can use cannabis. There's some bills being passed around this year to kind of fill in and change some of the regulations, the holes that we had there. We also have a bill that California NORML is working on to give pain patients a Bill of Rights. Dr. Kent talked about how some patients talking to their doctors about using cannabis are cut off, or they're told that they have to go find a new doctor. So we're trying to pass state legislation that would make it so that doctors can't do this, because it's hard to find a new doctor, and it's life-threatening for them to just cut you off from your pain medicine. So this is a very important topic. Another topic that we're trying to get a bill passed on is employment rights. Luckily, seniors sometimes don't have to worry about continually finding a job that doesn't test for marijuana, but a lot of people, this is a big problem for them. So we're trying to pass a law this year that will give people the ability to keep a job as long as they're not using cannabis at the workplace, or they're not under the influence, but that they should be able to use cannabis on their days off when they're not going to be affecting the workplace. So another thing we need is more local dispensaries. So right now everybody has to go to Santa Ana. So it's important to contact your city council people. It would be great if we could get something in like Laguna Hills or Laguna Woods or Lake Forest so people wouldn't have to travel so far. So what that takes really is people reaching out to their elected officials and letting them know that this is important, because if no one tells them, they don't think that people care. So you can sign up on California NORML, CANORML, and they send out emails every week letting you know what's going on legislatively. And they also have action alerts, which are pre-written letters. And all you have to do is put in your name and your address, and they'll send it to your representative, letting them know that you feel a certain way about one of these topics. So there's a lot that you guys can do to help advance medical marijuana. So thank you.
Okay, I'm Sherry Horn, and why am I here today? I'm here because as mayor last year, I was at the Conference of Mayors. We have them quarterly, and the county gets to come and talk about what their issues are. And they distributed this drug and alcohol morbidity and mortality in Orange County study. And that talks about drug overdoses, drugs mixed with drugs, drugs and alcohol, overdoses, accidental or on purpose. We rate third in the county. That's high. I thought maybe we can do something about it. And talking about these issues is a good place to start, because information is scarce. There's things that you can do, and so that's why I'm here. I was dismayed how high we rated statistically. And I wanted to do something about this, and especially Dr. Kent's study on opioids, There's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there about people that have not had to fill their prescription pain medication, people that have nerve pain like neuropathy or pain in their face. They didn't have to fill an opioid medication. I like the way Dr. Kent was talking and saying, don't change the way you're using your drugs. You would just need less. And reducing the amount of some of the opioids that we take can make us feel better. Cannabis is not addictive physiologically in the same way that pain pills are. You would never have cravings and OD and withdrawals from cannabis the way you do from pain pills. And this can be a difficult subject to talk about, so I'm really grateful to Friends of the Village for televising this and putting this on TV so that people that aren't comfortable yet to come out and find out answers or discuss it in front of other people will still be able to find out the information. Quality of life is what I want to talk about here, and it's so important. We have a very special community, we really do. The whole city is seniors, and so I'm talking about only seniors. I'm not talking about children or anything. And I believe we should use all the tools in the toolbox to feel better. And I don't think anyone should be judgmental of that. And there's so many different ways to use this now and it really helps. So feeling better physically and emotionally and being able to eat good food contributes to a quality of life. And just as you might have a glass of wine in the evening to relax, that relaxation is good for you. It's good for you to relax and feel better and de-stress. A little exercise, sunshine, being with friends, and when you feel better, you're more likely to want to go out and to see some of your friends and to take a walk with your dog or take them over to the dog park. And quality of life is everything here. I mean, we're seniors. We should have the best quality. We've worked our whole lives. It's time to feel good. So I want to talk to you about alternatives to some medications. We take drugs for pain, depression, loss of appetite, as well as blood pressure or diabetes, all kinds of medical things. And today we're talking about cannabis that's great for appetite, depression, and pain, and we feel more like socializing. So sometimes you can take cannabis and it would replace like 3 other drugs that you might be taking. And that's a good thing. The fewer drugs that we take, the less it's likely that we're going to overdose or mix them with the wrong things. Studies in the past, people had only been allowed to do studies to find out how bad marijuana was for you. They'd never been allowed to do studies to find out how good it was. And now there's one at UCLA with opioids they're working on. The VA just wanted to start one because there's tremendous evidence, anecdotal evidence, it's true, that PTSD for our veterans, they get a lot of relief, but they're afraid to talk to their doctors about it because the VA will kick them off the plans. The federal government said no, they're not even letting the VA study this. So some veterans are using cannabis anyway and feeling better and not using the pain medications that the VA prescribes. And there's other alternatives. There's acupuncture and meditation and all kinds of things. But for pain, you really need something. Maybe the acupuncture would help. Here in the city, it is legal. I mean, you can grow it. We will deliver it. No, we will deliver. You can have it delivered. Sorry. Some cities restrict delivery as if they know what a car as if they have no patients in their city and that no one in there should ever get cannabis. But they have plenty of patients. Here you can have it delivered, you can grow it, you can get it from a collective, you can get it from the dispensary. There's also something really special here. A facilitator group was formed at Village Canabis for people that when it's your first time that you want to try taking something and you're afraid, you don't want to be by yourself, people will come and sit with you that are trained. I mean, they go through questions, they know what to look for, they're users themselves, they know what they have been, there's a whole background with this. I am involved with that facilitator group. I think it's wonderful to be able to help people. The edibles sometimes can take up to 2 hours to take effect. So we're not going to sit there all night with somebody, but edibles are metabolized differently. So if you wanted instant relief from pain, smoking it or vaporizing it or a sublingual is very good. I started some a few weeks ago. I had arthritis in my shoulder. I probably still have arthritis in the shoulder, but I tried a topical. One I got from Mother's that was the non-psychoactive CBD oil. It really didn't help. It helped a little bit, but not very much. So I got the oil with the THC in it. It did a little bit, but it didn't really help. It probably would have it if it was a muscle or a nerve pain, but this is something inside the bone, the arthritis. So I started taking a tincture, and they said start slow. So I did 1 drop a night for like 3 or 4 nights. Then I went up to 2. And I went up to 6 drops, and my pain is gone. It's like a miracle. 6 drops on a spoon at night. I take it on the spoon. I don't put it in my mouth because I would miss, and it would get it all over the place. So I put it on the spoon. But it's been very effective. And I would encourage anybody to try it. And to try some of the forms of it that you want. If you don't want to get high, then don't use the THC one. But the THC, I believe in using a whole plant. I'm a holistic kind of person. And there's like 400 different chemical compounds in this plant, besides the THC, cannabidiol, THCA, and I mean, I am not the expert on medically breaking down this component, but I know that things work well together. And so even using this tincture, I don't get high from it, just the 6 drops, but I'm sure the THC that's in there, or the THCA, or whatever it is doing something. And it's wonderful, because I don't want to go back on pain pills. I've been there, done that. They feel good, they make you feel good, but it's very hard to quit pain pills. They can be very constipating. I know that's not a word usually used in polite conversation, but it's true. There's effects that they have on your body, and you don't have an appetite and you don't eat well, so there can be a real downside with opioids. So I was looking for alternatives, and I found this. So also here in California, they're starting a public bank so that businesses don't have to do just cash only. And that's great. I hope we proceed quickly with that. Vice TV I don't know if any of you saw it. All right. They did a fantastic show on veterans, and it was just marvelous. And I applaud Vice for the work that they've done and the work they continue to do on this. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Weedakit on the Vice channel. On RTV, it's 173. Excellent show. And not just for cannabis. They do all kinds of things for gay people and for all different kinds of things. So it's an interesting show. And we shouldn't be judgmental about what each other uses to get through the day and to improve their quality of life. We're all seniors. We all have aches and pains and suffer. And whether you're using acupuncture, whether you meditate, maybe you've eaten well and exercised your whole life so you don't have any of this and you just like to relax at night. There's nothing wrong with that. And I really want to let the community know that it's okay. It's legal here in California. It's certainly legal here in the city. And I think that seniors should try and feel as well as they possibly can to get through the day and have a productive life. There's so much to do here in this village. So many ways to express yourself and be part of life. And this is just one more way of allowing you to do that. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it, and thank you to Friends of the Village. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.